This week on Vaticano, we follow American bishops on pilgrimage to Rome as they visit the tombs of the apostles and meet with the Holy Father.
As I've said earlier, I do think some of this confusion that exists.
They speak to us about the challenges and hopes of the Church in America. Stay with us and see the imprint of the United States in Rome through the Pontifical North American College, the city's American parish, the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See, and the work of the patrons of the arts of the Vatican museums. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. For 4 months, starting from November of 2019 and running through February of 2020, every bishop of the United States is meeting Pope Francis. All bishops of the world are called to make these ad limina apostolorum visits about every 5 years. That's Latin for to the threshold of the apostles. It gives the bishops the chance to present a detailed report to the Pope on the status of their diocese. The U.S. bishops ad limina is the first with the current pontiff. The last U.S. ad liminas took place with Pope Benedict XVI from 2011 to 2012. Since then, much has happened, from the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court legalizing same-sex marriage to the election of the new president, the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia, and the crisis stemming from the mishandling of cases of sex abuse by clergy and financial misconduct. Every bishop has the opportunity to directly speak with Pope Francis and discuss the hopes and challenges of their diocese and of the Universal Church.
Well, myself, I did ask about the McCarrick situation. That was really something that all of us were very interested in knowing where this is going. And I'm very glad to hear that a report is coming, and we expect that it's going to be like pulling a scab off. It's going to be tough, we know that, but it's better to get that out, get that done with.
Can I ask specifically what it was that you asked the Holy Father and what it was that he responded?
Basically just wanted to know where this was, because we had heard that there was a report that was almost ready, and so he described that to us.
And have you had the possibility of speaking with other departments of the Holy See about the same issue?
Let's see, we did talk, of course, with Cardinal Parolin. We did talk about it there as well, and he also assured us. He's a little more nervous about the reception of this in the public. This is ultimately for the good of the Church. Yeah. The truth cannot hurt the Church, and I think that's important for all of us to recognize.
Did they say that the investigation is ongoing, or they're just seeing the moment when to present it?
No, I think they're still writing the report, final editing of the report. I think the investigation's finished. I'm not positive about that. One did mention, I think maybe it was Cardinal Parolin, that some more documents had just recently come up, and so they have to incorporate those in. I think that's where that is. My memory may not be exact on this matter.
And were all the bishops in the consensus that this needs to happen as soon as possible?
Oh yeah. Oh no, we were really insistent that this has to happen.
And the Holy Father understood that.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
How much time did you have with the Holy Father?
We were there for 2 hours.
And there was not a quiet moment. It just was.
Oh no, it just keeps questioning. And there was no like, you're next. You just raise your hand and you ask a question, and that's how it worked.
And what was the environment like? You know, we hear about, you know, this division in the media. They want to paint the bishops of the United States in one corner and the Holy Father into another. Did you feel any of that?
I didn't feel any of that at all. In fact, I really felt kind of at ease, at home there. I really felt like he wanted us to be seen and heard as his brother bishops. And I felt that that was achieved. So I remember somebody mentioned from an earlier one, they felt his paternal presence. I felt more fraternal in that sense, that we really were brothers sharing these things. I thought it went very, very well. I was very pleased.
The real nature of ad limina visits is that they're pilgrimages to the tombs of Saints Peter and Paul, to strengthen bishops' vocation as the successor of the apostles, and to reinforce their communion with the successor of Peter, the Pope. At the heart of the ad limina visits are masses at the main papal basilicas of St. Peter, St. Paul's outside the walls, St. John Lateran, and St. Mary Major. You mentioned in a radio interview earlier this week that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to explain what's going on in Rome, some of the decisions that are being made. How do you feel after this visit, and can you explain a little bit about what it is to describe things at home?
Well, I mean, I don't know that this visit's not going to solve anything, as far as I know, but it helps me. I understand now that the Holy Father really is very orthodox, very solid in his own faith, and that came across to us all. He does allow a lot of confusion out there. And maybe that's his own background. I don't know where it all comes from, personality perhaps. But I think it's that difference between his own personal view and kind of what he allows that creates some of this confusion that exists. I doubt that that's going to change. I mean, I think that's the nature more of his personality.
Do you have a new way of explaining that at this point after this experience?
I think at least my own conviction that he is standing in line. He's in continuity, not in discontinuity, and I think that's important. Now, what is allowed to happen outside, there might be some discontinuity in that, but I find that he is very much in continuity, and that encourages me, and so I think I'll be able at least just to say that, for what it's worth. You know, some people are not going to be convinced by that, and I understand that.
I want to speak just in general terms. The Pope came in on a reform mandate. He's reforming the Vatican, the sort of statutes that oversee the working of this central governance of the Catholic Church. So he's changing things. And people see that from a distance and also here close by, and they're asking themselves about these changes. What will the Church look like in short order and in the long term? How do you see that the Church is changing?
It's kind of like shifting things around, but you know, I think everybody here wants to be of help, both to the Holy Father and to the Universal Church, and I think they're trying their best to do that. One of the impressions I get from these visits, and I suppose I did have it from the previous ad limina as well, is they really do feel understaffed, and so they're swamped with a lot of work.
This reform process, as it takes place, people are watching on, and they really sort of rely on media to let them know what's happening or what is not happening. Do you think that that Pope Francis is getting a fair play, and the Vatican and the Catholic Church are getting a fair play in the media?
I do think that the key principle here, and again, I suppose that goes back to Evangelii Nuntiandi of St. Paul VI, is evangelization. The preaching of the gospel must be seen as an integral, well, not even just an integral part, but as the guiding principle for everything we do, whether it's in the Rota, the Tribunal, in Catholic education, whatever it is, it's got to be critical. And I think in our country, almost all of our dioceses have been engaged in this process, such that the language of the new evangelization has become part and parcel of our language in the United States. And so I think there's a great connection there between what Pope Francis wants, how he's trying to reform the Curia in that sense, and what we are doing back home.
And how do you do that in relationship with Rome? How do the U.S. bishops sort of maintain that relationship, not only through these ad limina visits?
I think we've been doing that quite well. Somebody was raising the issue that they felt that there was this great distance between U.S. bishops and the Holy See. And my only comment was almost everything we're doing as bishops, all of our documents, are really trying to incorporate the teachings of Pope Francis, and again, this evangelizing issue. And I think we've been doing that for the last 5 years. Just as we did with Benedict and we did with John Paul, I think we want to make the Universal Church present in the United States, and we want the United States to be part of the Universal Church.
One thing the Holy Father says is, pray for me and not against me.
Not against me. I've never heard that part of it. Okay, that's good. But no, and I do think that we have a keen sense that we do belong to a Universal Church. As I've said earlier, I do think some of this confusion that exists kind of bothers some people. And probably bothers a lot of people, and I'm not quite sure how to overcome that. That's as long as the Holy Father kind of allows that, you know, around him, it does have its effect, I think, in the Universal Church. And I think it's our job then as bishops to make sure we keep everybody, as I always like to tell everybody, playing in the sandbox together. We all have to talk to one another. We have to work together. I think that's important.
Great. Thanks so much, Bishop Boyer.
You're welcome.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano.
Which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world. No American.
A few days after the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. drone strike, Pope Francis appealed for peace during the first Angelus address of this year.
In many parts of the world, there is a terrible air of tension. War brings only death and destruction. I call on all parties to keep the flame of dialogue and self-control burning, and to ward off any shadow of enmity. Let us pray in silence that the Lord will give us this grace.
The head of the Archdiocese for Military Services, Archbishop Timothy Broglio, told EWTN during his ad limen in December that soldiers desperately want peace because, unlike many others, they know what war costs.
They've seen it in the friends and loved ones they've lost. They understand the separation that comes from war. So they're very anxious to live in peace. But peace is not only the discourse of one side, it has to be the discourse of all sides.
The U.S. Archdiocese for Military Services extends throughout the whole world because of the three groups that fall under its pastoral responsibilities. They are active duty military and their families, veterans, and those who work for the U.S. federal government outside the USA.
The largest diocese in the world by extension, not by population, but by extension, because it does cover the whole world. We are also the largest provider of priests to the United States of America. And I think that's because young men who have already volunteered to serve their country are already looking to another goal, a goal outside themselves. I think also anyone who served in the military in these last 19 years has been exposed to deployments. That means he's gone into an area of battle. Those situations, you ask fundamental questions about life and death. And I think you also then ask questions about life after death. And certainly fundamentally, we exist to help people on the journey to everlasting life. And so I think those are certainly two factors. A third would be already being able to work in a situation that is hierarchical, being able to take orders, and also being able to be a guide for people. An officer is charged to be a leader, and of course a priest is also charged to be a leader.
Archbishop Broglio said that during the meeting with the Pope, his group discussed the challenges of preaching the gospel in today's world, the work of the Bishops' Conference, and the formation of priests, which is a crucial point for his archdiocese. Despite the high number of vocations, there's still a lack of ministers in the military service. The Pontifical North American College is home to diocesan seminarians from across the United States while they study at the pontifical universities in the heart of the Church. The college provides housing to roughly 250 seminarians from the U.S. and Australia, offers spiritual direction and guidance, and gives them opportunities to keep in shape not only in spirit, but also in body through the various sporting activities. One of the highlights of the year is the ordination of fourth-year seminarians to the diaconate in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. They also carry out the yearly Lenten tradition of the Station Church pilgrimage, journeying at dawn to the historic churches of Rome every day of Lent for Mass. The parish for U.S. residents and American pilgrims to Rome is St. Patrick's Church, just a few blocks away from the U.S. Embassy to Italy. The church was founded in 1911 thanks to the work of an Irish Augustinian from Limerick, Father Patrick Glynn. The mosaics that adorn the church were made by the early 20th century artist Rodolfo Villani, depicting St. Patrick converting the High King of Ireland in the 5th century, using the shamrock leaf to explain the Trinity. In the apse of the church, there's a quote taken from the writings of St. Patrick that in Latin says, "Be Christians as those of the Roman Church." The left side altar is dedicated to the Sacred Heart with a mosaic of the Last Supper. And on the right side, the altar is dedicated to Our Lady of Graces. Through the great generosity and hospitality of the Augustinians, in 2017, St. Patrick's became the parish of the American Catholic community in Rome. And Father Greg Aparsel is its chaplain.
We are finally in a place where we can be forever on our own and with great joy welcoming all kinds of people who wish to come here.
The parish helps pilgrims with information and tickets for papal events, offers guided tours in Rome, and most importantly, supports the spiritual life and formation for the faithful. The United States and the Vatican recently celebrated 35 years of diplomatic ties, which were established by St. Pope John Paul II and President Ronald Reagan in 1984.
I have had the great honor and pleasure and benefit of words of wisdom from His Holiness about the problems that concern us all in the world today.
This year, during the traditional greeting of the diplomats accredited to the Holy See, Pope Francis emphasized his worries about heightening tensions between Iran and the United States.
Rinnovo dunque il mio appello.
I therefore renew my appeal that all the interested parties avoid an escalation of the conflict and keep alive the flame of dialogue and self-restraint in full respect of international law.
Nel pieno rispetto della legalità internazionale.
Current U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich, was present. Since her appointment in 2017, she's focused the embassy's attention on promoting religious freedom, combating human trafficking, and supporting the work of women within the Catholic Church. We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. There's a significant collaboration between the United States and the Vatican in the field of the preservation of art. In 1982, Vatican Museum's exhibition in the United States actually paved the way for the establishment of the Patrons of the Arts in the Vatican Museums, the organization that still today sponsors the preservation and restoration of museum works. The latest restoration work was presented last November to celebrate 35 years of diplomatic relations between the Holy See and the United States of America. The Crivelli's Gold exhibition was prepared and launched together by the American Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich, and the Director of the Vatican Museums, Barbara Yatta. Guido Corini from the Department of Decorative Arts shows us the recently restored 5-panel polyptych.
Polyptych, so far believed to be by the hand of Carlo's younger brother, Vittore. He builds the images the very same way he does in the other two cases. So we're fairly sure that he was the autograph, let's say, regisseur of all the concept behind this important polyptych, including the most important passages in it, so i.e. the Virgin and Child, and perhaps the Saint Jerome to the left, to the far left, whereas it's still possible to imagine the participation of a minor hand, not necessarily his brother, but some talented pupil from his close workshop.
The two other works on display are paintings representing the splendid lunette of the Pietà and of the Madonna and Child. Patrons of the arts were pioneers of relations between the two states. They actually started financing restorations for the Vatican a year before the official establishment of diplomatic ties between the Holy See and the United States of America. The patrons of the Vatican Museums are now promoting long-term projects such as the restoration of the Vatican Gardens, the Bramante Courtyard at the Vatican Museums, and the frescoes in the vaults of the Pontifical Sanctuary of the Holy Stairs. This complex underwent almost 30 years of restoration, and the cleaning of the Holy Stairs over the last spring was the culmination of the restoration work. According to tradition, the stairs were brought to Rome by St. Helen in the 4th century. Although there are no historical accounts of the authenticity of the stairs, there is hope that the restoration works will shed more light on this.
It is difficult to give certainties of this kind, but we analyzed the situation, every single step to determine the type of marble and to classify the differences. But what can already be seen by the eye, which other experts have noted as well, that these marbles are grouped into several groups and they are not completely homogeneous. But all the marble comes from Greece or Asia Minor.
Dalla Grecia o dall'Asia Minore.
The Vatican Museums have also been entrusted with the care of the restoration work after the restoration of the ancient papal chapel of the Sancta Sanctorum. In the year 2000, a project was started to restore all the frescoes and decorations made in the rooms that Sixtus V built between 1588 and 1590, starting with the chapel of San Silvestro.
But what's been interesting is because of the support from the Vatican patrons, we've been able to kind of create a renaissance for this site. And faithful, the number of pilgrims has increased, the number of visitors has increased, funding's increased, and the Patrons themselves are able to make a more managerial project for their own sanctuary. So it's a win-win situation.
U.S. Catholics have a tight bond with the Vatican, keeping unity with the Pope and helping the Universal Church to carry out its salvific mission.